Kids in the Hall are a Canadian sketch comedy group made famous for a half-hour television show which aired between 1988 to 1995. Growing up in southern Ontario in the 90s and discovering the strange and offbeat comedy of Dave Foley, Bruce McCulloch, Kevin McDonald, Mark McKinney, and Scott Thompson was just what a young and impressionable pulp culture aficionado was waiting for. The Kids in the Hall was produced by Lorne Michaels, the Canadian-American television mogul who's been a huge influence in comedy for the past 30 years. After his assistant saw the kids performing in a Toronto nightclub in 1987, she directed Lorne's mighty gaze upon them, and the Lorne smiled, and the Lorne saw that it was good. With the blessing of the Lorne beneath their wings, the kids jumped straight into a television deal, adapting the handful of characters, situations, and ideas that had gained them a small following of Torontonians. The kids began to hone their comic craft in front of an audience of millions. The Kids in the Hall style of comedy could be described as strange and surreal, water-cooler, observational comedy. The settings of their sketches are often very ordinary slices of life that general audiences can immediately relate to. Offices, homes, supermarkets. Right off the bat, there's the never-not-hilarious aspect of having all 5 of the kids play absolutely every part: man, woman, child, chicken, Dave, undead, waiter, or cabbage. Drag has long since been a staple of comedy. Monty Python did it all the time. I'm not going to try to tackle whether the cross-dressing in the Kids in the Hall is currently problematic. I think it was largely progressive for its time. But that isn't to say it might not be offensive now. What is true is that the kids were unapologetically themselves. They were punks, they were outcasts, they were average, but they had a brand of comedy that was wholly unique. They used absurdity to point out the fact that modern life is absurd. From business, democracy, science, art, or entertainment, no human pursuit wasn't at some point tackled. As a Canadian, I also can't not point out the importance of the kids being Canadian. Now, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of pointing out just what percentage of the great Canadian identity revolves around being not American, but there's an undeniable yearning to see yourself on television. So seeing something as striking, weird, and Canadian as the Kids in the Hall, even years later in endless reruns on the Comedy Network, made it special. There's undoubtedly something similar in the foundational bedrock of your own sense of humor, an indispensable source of new comedic energy and surprise, with a certain je ne sais quoi that hits at just the right time in your life. The show initially ran from 1989 to 1995 on CBC in Canada and CBS, HBO, and Comedy Central in the United States. The kids took their name from American comic legend Sid Caesar, who would blame the kids in the hall or the young writers in the studio whenever a joke bombed for him. The kids smashed into the second half of the 90s with their debut film, Brain Candy.
But we will settle for this. Cashier's check for $10,000. Which families will receive if a lucky loved one goes to a better place. Their happiest memory.
Wow, that's a lot of money. How pleasing.
A commercial failure, the film marked the end of the Kids in the Hall in their original incarnation. A cult classic and beloved by many fans, obviously for greater audiences at the time, the kids' brand of humor just didn't translate the film. Or maybe audiences of April 1996 were just laughed out after a whirlwind few months of offbeat comedy at the cinema. After Brain Candy, the kids went their separate ways for a while. Dave Foley, forever destined to be the brightest star of Constellation Kids in the Hall, had already left. Upset at the script and convinced the film would never actually come together, only filming it for contractual reasons. After Brain Candy, he transitioned to the highly popular sitcom News Radio, and then faded into less relevant roles, and then comedy purgatory. As an actor, Bruce McCulloch never did anything as popular as The Kids in the Hall. He did go on to direct this Much Music Video Award-winning Music at Work video with The Tragically Hip, and comedy films like Dog Park, Superstar, and Stealing Harvard. Unfortunately, like everyone in Hollywood, you're only hot till you're not, and then you ain't squat.
Hey there.
How you doing?
Good. You boys here for business or pleasure?
Just going fishing.
Good time, and you'll be up to your walleye. I caught one last week with 7 kilograms.
Is that big?
Is that big? That's like 9 decimeters from tip to tail. You a jigger man?
What'd you call me?
Well, I like to use the jigger rod for when I'm catching the walleye, but of course when you're doing that, you gotta run extra light.
More recently, Bruce has produced the sketch comedy show TallBoyz, taking a new group of Canadian sketch comedians under his wing. Kevin McDonald, forever destined to be the "hey, it's that guy" for the rest of his life, is a full-time working actor in both live action and voice work. Mark McKinney showed up in a few places, and then focused his efforts into creating and writing a moderately successful Canadian TV show. While not focusing on acting, he'll still pop up from time to time for a surprising appearance.
This is so unfair! Can I even slam the door?
I'd rather that you didn't.
Lastly, Scott Thompson, gayest of the kids, has the most post-Kids in the Hall credits. He's also had his house firebombed and battled cancer. Also, he's in a really funny episode of WTF Podcast with Mark Maron. Highly recommended. The kids reunited for the CBC miniseries, The Kids in the Hall, Death Comes to Town. A bizarre show that has a few gleaming moments of charm for classic kids fans. It's frequently as strange as their classic show, but seldom as funny. So, what has made The Kids in the Hall connect with audiences? McCulloch said it best. We all grew up as unhappy young men, or young men who hadn't found their place. We were of the suburbs. We were of parents that were always getting drunk and or having heart attacks. We grew up going, it doesn't have to be this way. This feeling gave fuel to the punk rock aesthetic of the kids. From their opening titles to the frequent fourth wall breaking, audience addressing sketches, their comedy felt raw, real, and relatable. Not just for Canadian weirdos, but for that weirdo in all of us. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe for more.
Thank God that's finally over.